The CN beta for Neverest to Everest came out yesterday, and I was one of the selected few content creators to be able to jump in and play the game firsthand. I wanted to give my first impressions on this one. So I did about a 2-hour live stream last night, and I went through a good chunk of the story as well as the combat. I wanted to talk about my first impressions on this one. I do plan on playing a lot more over the last couple of days, but obviously with Thanksgiving being today, the day that I'm recording this, I haven't had too much time because it just dropped last night. And so I wanted to talk about my first impressions, and then we'll kind of play the next couple of days. And then I'll give like kind of a final like verdict. Basically, this is a beta, so obviously there's some things that I'm going to be a little bit lenient on and not as harsh, just because it's obviously going to be subject to change. There's a couple of ping issues, I guess is what I would kind of call them. Let's go ahead and jump into the first thing, and that is going to be the story. So I actually like the presentation for the story. I think it was executed pretty well. The animations are really nice. The expressions on the characters are really nice. The characters themselves are designed very well. I like the outfits. I like the personality so far. I was able to play with a little bit of an overlay that translates some of the CN stuff, because again, this is in CN, so you're going to have the language barrier there, but I was able to play with a overlay that would translate it to English. Now, it didn't always do one for one, right? Because it is just kind of one of those things that's reading it as it's going and trying its best to make it in English. But I wanted to do that at least for like the first 20 or 30 minutes, because I wanted to get a good idea of what the story was kind of about, at least get an idea of where it was going, not based on just visual cues, but what I was able to read. And I think the story actually has some promising atmosphere stuff. I like the supernatural stuff. I think that's kind of a cool path for this game to take, because we haven't really seen too much go into like, I want to use horror like loosely here because it's more supernatural. It's really not that scary. I mean, it kind of dives into, you know, spirituals and stuff like that, and some different entities and anomalies, and, you know, kind of a little bit darker themes, but I wouldn't say it's too scary, right? But it does have a supernatural stuff, and I think it's kind of cool because at the very beginning of the game, you can kind of see the duality of that, because it shows like kind of these spiritual-esque areas that are a little bit more horrific and a little bit more grayscaled. And then you go into the city, and it's so lively and so blossomed and so like colorful. And it's kind of a cool duality that you can kind of see that these worlds coexist essentially in this like day-night cycle almost, where, you know, one's like gruesome and gross and all this stuff, and then this other one's like lively and, you know, it just has all this life to it. And it's really kind of cool to see that very early on. But on side of that, I would say that you just start to see these games are getting a higher budget for the animations. So I do expect that a lot of the newer gachas are going to be on this scale of like, you know, kind of like that Zenless Zone Zero stuff with the storytelling, where they're very expressive. They have like the facial expressions, and, you know, they're just really cool and animated and stuff like that. I can kind of see that being like kind of the standard for, you know, moving on, because they just have bigger budgets for these gacha games, and some of these bigger companies are publishing them and stuff like that. So I do think that this is kind of going in their favor, obviously, as one of the first few to be able to do this. And I like it. I like the storytelling. I like the humor of it. I think it's really funny from the stuff that I was able to read. And the characters, like I said, are pretty lovable. I like the outfits that they have for them. And I think you meet quite a bit of characters pretty early on. Like in the first hour, you're meeting like 7-8 people. So it can be kind of overwhelming when you're introduced to so many of the cast, because you're like trying to kind of figure everybody out. And then obviously you have the language barrier, like I discussed earlier. So it's kind of hard to tell exactly how everybody's going, but you can tell the personality even without, you know, like understanding everything about the language. I think it's really cool that they're able to express that. And like I said on the live stream, if there's anything that gets me into a story more, it's like, even if the language is different, if I'm interested and intrigued in the story, just based on that, I know it's going to be a decent story anyway, because if I don't even understand it and I'm still intrigued to see what's kind of going on, then at least it has some sort of fundamentals that I think are promising anyway for myself. So I think it's kind of a cool way to, you know, progress through that. But let's talk about the combat. You know, obviously we played about 2 hours of it, and there may be some more stuff that I can kind of learn more about, but I did have a ping issue. So it turns out that a lot of people were kind of jumping on at the same time, and unfortunately that was kind of giving it some issues with latency and the alt button, bro. It's just like I would have to press it like 4 times for it to actually work, and it was kind of frustrating. But it looks like it's just kind of an issue with everybody logging on at the same time. So I'll have to log on tonight to kind of see if it's still of an issue. But again, it's still a beta, so that's where I'm kind of lenient on, because stuff like that hopefully will get ironed out and it won't be too much of an issue moving forward. But the combat itself is actually pretty lackluster. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I'm not going to beat around the bush. If you're looking for this game out of like just solely something to play, like a Wuthering Waves or something with a complex system like Zenless Zone Zero, this is probably not going to be it for combat, unless they start introducing some different characters that have more complex kits, or they start to kind of revamp the story, or not the story, but the combat itself. Because right now it's pretty much just like 2 skills, and then you can QT and you do your basic attack. It's pretty much just mashing your basic attack, do your skill, Give out an ult, you use your ult, then you QT into somebody else. All right, so there's not too much else to do besides that. And the enemies are a little spongy. They're a little bit higher level for the most part from what I've been able to see. But I do like the boss fights. I think the boss fights are kind of dynamic in the sense that the attacks themselves are kind of fun. They're a little bit more fun to dodge and kind of go through. You get 3 dodges. So I guess I didn't mention that, but you do get a 3 dodge. You can just, you know, click your space or whatever, but you kind of are limited on that. You can't just dodge forever, which is kind of cool. You also have like a perfect timing where if you dodge at the right time, you have the kind of matrix system stuff. And that's pretty much, you know, action games, right? At this point, most of the action games have like a perfect dodge with the little window there. But for the most part, when I was fighting the actual bosses themselves, they're fun. They had a lot of cool moves. Once you get into the rhythm of them, they're not that hard to dodge. And the mobs themselves, they can pretty much just be like a stun lock forever. Like, I don't think they ever hit me because you can just keep hitting them and they'll keep getting flinched, right? They'll just keep getting hit and hit and hit. And even when they're attacking, there's some times where you can just hit them out of the attack and they'll just get flinched again. So you can pretty much just, like, no matter what level they are, you could just flinch them forever. You don't really have to dodge. And when you do have to dodge, they're rather slow. But again, this is a beta. So obviously, hopefully, anyway, I'm going to put in my feedback that I think the combat's too easy. I think the mobs are too easy, at least the base level mobs. And I would like to see something else with the combat. I think it's a little bit too, I don't know, man. Like, it's just a little too simplistic. But if you are looking for like a story game that just has different elements to it that isn't centric around combat and you're just kind of looking at combat as a complementary thing, I don't think it could be a bad game. I definitely think that there's certain aspects that need to open up for me. There's driving in the game. It looks like there's also different things that you can do with, like, you know, having your own house and stuff like that. So maybe there's a little level to that. If you like the like kind of simulation stuff, the lifestyle stuff, maybe that could be another draw for you. It doesn't have to be combat, you know, and sometimes these games don't need that type of combat if that's not the way they're going. But they do have quite a bit of combat in this, so I would imagine that that's at least something that they're looking into in terms of having a little bit more of, right? So yeah, if I was talking about just kind of looking at this game as a whole, just based on the 2 hours that I played so far, I would say it's definitely something to keep on your radar. I think it has a lot of potential from story aspects. I like story, obviously, on the channel. I played a lot of story stuff, and so I can kind of get a good idea what's good, what's bad from very early on. I think that's going to be kind of a promising area there, but if you're looking for solely combat, then I would kind of watch from afar and kind of hope that they change a couple of different things. Look at some feedback from some people. Like I said, I will be playing over the next couple of days. If it gets any more complex, I'll let you guys know in like a final review of the beta. But again, it's a beta, could change, whatever. It's not even a global beta. So there could be things that change even before that. And of course, hopefully, if they're willing to still work with me by then, we'll get into global beta and then we'll get into the release and we'll talk about it all. So hopefully this is something you guys want to check out. If you do, make sure to like the video and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good rest of your night, guys. Peace.